Hello, welcome back. Good to see you again, all my favorite coder cats and coder kittens. Sorry for being away for a bit, but I am here once again to talk to you about Linden scripting language. Now, I had promised one talking about how to deal with that pesky situation where things don't all invisible correctly. This is mostly seen on builds with a lot of parts. And the best I can figure is that what probably happens is that between the object setting every piece by piece to turn invisible and your client recognizing that, some piece gets lost in the mix. But I've gotten annoyed with that myself and built a special tool to deal with that I'm going to teach you about today. I'm going to teach you how to make it yourself. So first, we're going to look at the normal method for doing a multiple invisibility, which would be, let's move that over there. Okay to future me when editing. It is now okay. I don't plan to move this again. And that is set link alpha, link set 0 all sides. This is simple, memory efficient, and usually gets the job done. We save it, and oh, somehow I got a dash there instead of a 0. And the object turns invisible. When you have only a few pieces, that works beautifully. But if you have more than a few pieces, that doesn't always do the trick. So I've created my own tool which uses llSetLinkPrimitiveParams. Do I have a copy sitting here, or do I have to pull it out of one of my other objects? Here it is. And let's give it more than one piece to work with here. Whoop, don't actually need that. That was a little typer I'd made at one point that we don't actually need. Alright, so this gives us 9 little boxes. So we're going to drop alpha script writer right into the middle. You see what it does is it just kicks out automatically code that I can do this with. Float x. I've mentioned to a lot of people that know me in SL that one of my favorite tricks is creating code that writes my code for me. That was an example of that right there. In fact, let me back that up a touch. And having it done in such a way that it comes on a separate line from the thing that says it means I literally just go down, shift, down arrow, delete, down arrow, shift, delete, shift, delete. Makes it very easy to clean up until all that's left is the actual code. That is an unimportant message there. It gives the link number for each piece. It invokes the prim color part of set link primitive parameters. It sets it to all sides. Gives a color because alpha is a function of color when you go set link primitive parameters. And then to set this up to control it this way, I just have to make a simple toggle down here, if on and else. Since we're only dealing with one variable, I could leave it as if and else, but we're going to show you the longer way to do it in case you are not dealing with a simple toggle and you're making something like this part of a larger build. equals false, alpha 0, return, on equals true, alpha 1, return. Save. Uh-oh, it looks like a couple of them did not process correctly. So the question is, why? They're part of this. So let's see. My typing is just not with it today. All right, that's object 0. Did I miss an object 0? It wasn't able to read properly a 1 entry for 0, but in the chance of something like that, we can create one right here. So by adding that in, there was more than one object there. That was why that one was still doing that. That was just something silly that happened. And we're going to do the same thing up here. Find out why it didn't go. Number 9. There is no secondary object there. But we don't have a 9. We can address both of these potential problems when we go back and analyze the script. There. Now it works on the entire thing correctly. And I've done some very complicated multi-object links with this without ever seeing something visibly left behind. So how did this work? What's going on under the hood? And why did we have those couple of little problems? Well, first, we can probably fix the 1 down here, but we'll get to that in a moment. If you've been watching things for a while, then you've gotten used to a for loop, which we have here. We establish an integer I, we establish an integer count, which counts the number of objects in the total link set. And then starting with I equals 0, as long as I is less than count, we'll make that less than or equal to count. And I equals I plus 1. We then create a string message, which is a string version, because get link primitive parameters will produce a list. No matter even if there's only one item in it, it will be formatted as a list, so we need to tell it to treat it as a string. Get link primitive parameters, I, prim color, all sides. The all sides thing gets twitchy if you have more than one side to something that's colored differently, but for most cases, it's simpler than that. So this works out. If you have a piece that has multiple sides, then you would go through and set that particular piece differently. But most of the time, for most builds, this will work just fine. String color is get substring message, so we're taking a portion of this, 0 until it reaches the final mark right there. Why is that important? Well, let's set this up to find out. Say 0, message. Let's have a look at it. And then the final part, it creates an owner say, which is the main thing we saw, \n, that is a line break. That \n is why these are always one line lower, which is what makes it very easy to remove that. And then the command, as though we were typing it in as code, set link primitive parameters fast, string I, so that's telling it to, we're doing the specific link number that all of this was scanning, then plus, because we did one string of text right to there, then we added another string pulled from the integer of which piece we're looking for. Then we're adding another string, which is just the comma after the link number, and then designating which factor of things we're changing. In this case, prim color on all sides to the color that is isolated here with the get substring, because get substring, you say what string you're reading, message, where you're starting, the very first entry, and where you're stopping, which substring index says whatever number in message is the first instance of that character. So it's telling us to start from the beginning until we reach that character, and that gets plugged in here. It's being formatted as a string, so even though it's a vector, which we see right here as a vector, it's formatted as a string, and then X, which I will go back to the other and go over again why that's so useful. Closing the bracket to close the list of parameters we're dealing with, closing parentheses, and a semicolon. Then we have quotation marks. That ends treating this entire chunk as a string. Then we have a closing bracket and a semicolon that ends the owner say. So we're going to run the modified version that will actually show us what comes out from get link primitive parameters. So you see when we go for color, we get the actual color and then a whole bunch of other information that we don't actually need. So we're starting at 0. This is where this comes in. String color equals get substring, starting at 0, or the very first entry, continuing until it finds that right there, and that stops. That is why we come out with those. And we changed it to less than or equal, so we should actually have a 9 in here. Bingo. There's the 9. That's what we were missing before. So by doing this, I'm saving myself a lot of trouble writing all this individual code. I can just run this little program, copy all of this, and I get the control I want. Now going back into here, why is it all formatted with X? That's simple. Very rarely do you need to have separate alpha controls for a sheet, for something you're taking out or putting away. Most of the time, it's going to be the same thing. Maybe you have one or two pieces that you would go in and set to always be invisible, like a muzzle flash. That would be always invisible because there's special code that controls when it shows, but that's the only time it shows. Okay, you would go through manually and set that to 0 on here. Otherwise, you control it here. I want it to disappear here, so I feed it alpha 0, because alpha has an argument, a floating point variable that labeled X. All of these have X as a variable they can take. Floating point is what that command expects, so that's what we use. And I want it to be on, I feed it a 1. So by making that one little thing up here an X, I can use the exact same block of code for if I want to make it visible or invisible. Otherwise, I would have to duplicate this code, one set for visible, one set for invisible. So this is much simpler and reuses code. And that is always a thing you want to do. Reusing code is not only memory efficient, but it makes going through and making alterations or debugging things much, much easier. So that is it for this week's Coder Kitties workshop, where I'm just back on track after what happened. Those of you who watched a few weeks ago know exactly what I'm referring to there. But I'm going to keep these going again. Next week, we're going to talk about a scavenger hunt system. I went ahead and made one of these for one of our people on Discord. They had it, for them it was time sensitive, so I went ahead and just made it for them. But next week, I'm going to show you all how to do it each step of the way. So that will be next week on Coder Kitties Workshop. There will also tomorrow be a new episode of Coder Kitty Decodes LSL. So yeah, I'm back. Thank you, all of you, for your patience with things. So I will see you then. But until then, good day, good week, happy coding.